Welcome to Highly Sensitive, Happily Married, the podcast that teaches you to not only have an easier marriage as a sensitive woman, but to have one that feels more amazing by the day. Where you'll hear relatable stories, love advice that works, and coaching on how to have a marriage where feeling upset and disconnected is a thing of the past, and where instead a sense of loving connection and even fun and lightness is the norm. I'm Hannah Brooks, highly sensitive person, love expert, and marriage coach, and I'm so happy to be on this journey with you. Hello, my friends, and welcome to this special, rare episode where you get to hear me have a conversation with one of my clients from my program, Treasured, and how she totally changed her marriage for the way better, as you'll hear by doing this work. Now, this is kind of a rare episode because, as you might imagine, it can feel pretty vulnerable to share your vulnerable story to the world, as Gina will do today on this podcast. So I am just so grateful and impressed by Gina and all my other clients who have been willing to get up here and share their story with you. So let's just, all of us, share a moment of gratitude and celebration for their bravery. Because within each and every one of these stories from these brave women, you're able to learn something. You're able to relate and feel inspired and hopeful and really get some important nuggets of wisdom to make your own marriage better too. So thank you. And with no further ado, let's give a big, huge welcome to the wonderful Gina. Welcome, Gina. It's just such a pleasure and such an honor to have you here. And I just appreciate you so much for being willing to talk with us today and share your story.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you inviting me.
So happy to have you here. So let's talk about what were things like for you and your relationship before you started Treasured.
Before I started Treasured, my relationship felt very disconnected because my husband and I had some serious issues in our relationship in the past. I had built some very strong walls around myself to keep from, to protect my emotions, to keep myself from getting hurt.
Yeah.
I didn't really share any of my personal thoughts or feelings with my husband because I was afraid they would be used against me. I didn't speak up if I disagreed with anything because I was afraid to rock the boat. If my husband said anything that hurt my feelings, I would just immediately shut down. We didn't fight very much at all. But we also did not have any kind of a personal, intimate relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds kind of lonely is one of the things that comes to my mind.
It was very lonely.
Yeah. Yeah. And how long were things like that between you and your husband?
I would say that our relationship turned really bad. I would say toxic even. When my boys were very young. I would say when the youngest was like newborn. And things were really bad for quite a while. And then I separated myself. I sort of separated myself from the situation and that's when I started building the walls to protect myself. I started like avoiding my husband as much as possible and just staying on my own as much as possible and building the walls.
Yeah.
And altogether, I would say we lived like this in our relationship for about 22 years.
Yeah, that's a long time to feel so walled off and lonely in your own
Yes,
home and relationship.
and it made it very difficult to break down the walls on my own.
Yeah, right. That makes so much sense because they were deeply like long held patterns.
Yes, they were.
Yeah, yeah. And the longer we go about our patterns, ultimately the harder they are to break, right? Habits that stick around a long time are harder to change. So I'd love to hear, just like almost like we could fast forward, right, to now and to the end of your time in Treasured, and share with us what shifted for you and what are things like now. And then we'll dig into the stuff about like, how did that happen, right? What did you
Yeah,
do?
yeah.
But we'll jump forward in time a little bit to hear how things are now.
Surprisingly, I was shocked at how fast things started changing once I began my work in Treasured. We started out with sort of like the stress busting exercises, and that really helped to kind of calm me down so that I could start the work.
Yes.
And then as I started sort of very carefully, starting to open up and, you know, talk more personally with my husband, or, ask questions about things that were bothering me, things that in the past I would have been absolutely terrified to ask because I I I just was terrified of the reaction that I would get. But actually, the more I opened up and the more I shared, the more I found that, my fears were totally unfounded, and that my husband responded very positively, and we just started becoming more connected and closer through our conversations. And then as that connection kind of grew, we slowly started, feeling more comfortable being more affectionate with each other. Things, small things like the hugs got more intimate, the kisses felt more intimate,
Mm.
holding hands, which we had not done in a long time. I felt comfortable asking him to hold my hand, and he happily
Mm.
did it, and now does it all on his own. I
Yeah, it's so beautiful.
Yeah, that
I
that
love
was
that so
that
much.
that part that part was very surprising to me as I got a better understanding of the way my brain works,
Mhm.
and learned how to get more control of my thoughts
Mhm.
instead of letting them kind of spiral
Yes.
out of control. I, I began, to let go of the negative memories, the grudges, and the anger that I had been holding on to for so long,
Yeah.
and began to focus more on the person my husband had become.
Mm.
And I started appreciating his many good qualities.
Yes.
But I think the biggest shift was in letting myself starting to feel my feelings again.
Yeah.
I didn't realize how sort of blah my world had been until I started letting the emotions in again. I didn't realize that as I was blocking out all of those negative emotions I
Mhm.
was trying to avoid, I was also blocking out all the positive emotions.
Yes.
And once I started letting them all back in, it was just like a flood, of emotions that I had to learn how to control.
Yeah. Yeah. and just feel and just like let be there, right?
Yes, exactly.
Instead of trying to push them away. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's so huge. And I remember that process for you. And it makes so much sense, Gina, that you were walling yourself off because of how hard things had been earlier on, right? When your kids were little. And if I recall correctly, that time was more full of fights and conflict and reactions between you. And is that true?
That is absolutely correct. It was so bad that it started affecting my health. There was nothing physical going on,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
there were a lot of like full-blown yelling fights.
Yeah.
It was not a pleasant atmosphere to be in.
Right. And so I heard you say a few minutes ago that your fears were unfounded as you learned how to break down those walls many years later, right? In our work
Yes.
together. I just want to be clear, like it was a protective strategy, maybe an unconscious one, maybe even a conscious one to withdraw and to kind of avoid. And so it wasn't like wrong of you, right? To kind of cut yourself off. And it wasn't so much that you shouldn't have been fearful, right? I guess I'm just trying to help listeners understand that the fears were valid, and yet a lot of time had passed. And as you grew and changed, you were actually able, especially with our work, through our work together, to feel safer to handle all feelings. Yeah, that's kind of what you've been saying.
Yes.
Yeah, which made it possible to be more vulnerable, to open up, to start sort of taking the risk of talking to him again, right? And trying to connect with him again and be more affectionate with him. And lo and behold, when you're coming from that place of more vulnerability versus maybe how you guys both were together way back in the day, that's a very different energy that opens up very different possibilities. So I just
Yeah.
wanted to insert that part.
Yes. And during all that time, my husband he was also not the same person
Yes.
either. He had done some growing and changing on his own.
Hmm.
And,
Hmm.
that also helped, give me a little confidence.
Yeah, and because that's a long time, right? And that 20 years or so. It's so interesting because our instinct as humans is to kind of keep reacting as if the past were in the present in a way.
Yes.
And what you chose to do was through this work is stop the old ways of being and step into new ways of being. Do you happen to have any specific stories you can share to illustrate how things are or how
Well,
they're different?
it's more the accumulation of the small daily moments, um,
Yeah,
that
totally.
have rebuilt our trust and
Mm.
closeness with each other. Um, Again, times where in the past I would have been afraid to bring up sensitive issues, but now I use methods that I learned in Treasure to communicate in a way that my husband understands.
Mhm.
Um, or I approach I know now how to approach things with more love and compassion,
Yeah.
and see things from a different perspective, and everything is just received with a much more positive outcome, a much more positive result. I mean, just this past weekend, I mean, we brought up like a couple of very personal issues with each other, and
Mhm.
we felt comfortable. We had very open, honest conversations with each other, and
Mhm.
that is just such a dramatic change from the way things were in the past, ever, even from when we were first married.
Mm. I love that so, so much. And I remember one of the things we talked about, at least in one of our treasured calls, was that sometimes, I mean, this isn't weird, right? Like all couples have this. You and your husband have different views on things and different perspectives and maybe even different values. Is that something that you're able to navigate now?
Yes, and that is actually even a lot easier to talk about. And now, he will say something that I disagree with, and I can say, well, I see your point, but
Hmm.
I feel this way. And
Hmm.
he will back off of being so opinionated about it, and
Yes.
he will sort of calm his tone down a
Hmm.
bit.
Hmm.
Whereas he was coming across quite opinionated. Now he's backed off,
Yeah.
a little bit, and is more willing to see kind of two sides of it.
Ah,
So
that's so cool.
yeah, so that it helps that we're not quite so divided on things.
Yeah. Yeah, instead of sort of this domineering way, like you're more equals now in many ways, it sounds like, or there's a sense of that between you.
Yes.
And I'm just going to say, like, I'll ask you about this too, but for anyone listening who is kind of relating to this or wanting things to feel more like that, so much of this has to do with stepping into, like for Gina, like you stepping into more, again, safety and security inside yourself, right? So you're actually speaking up, but not speaking up angrily or critically per se, but just speaking what's true for you from a more confident place. Yeah.
Yes, that's it exactly.
Yeah. And I just think this is so huge for you. I mean, all of this is because when we are feeling so walled off and just avoiding and fearful of what will happen if we speak up, and when we live that way for a really long time, it's very challenging. Um, it takes great courage and some really great skills to break free of that. So I'm just so proud of you for the work that you did to be able to really be yourself, right? And be safe in yourself and your speak your mind and ask for what you want and share your opinion and be vulnerable. It's just so beautiful and it's so magical, like how how much change you created. Right. Because even if your husband had grown, which he sounds like he did over those 20 years, right? He changed it wasn't until you took the initiative to lead the way back to connection that things became connected again.
Right. I definitely saw Treasured as sort of a last ditch effort to save my relationship and to get myself out
Mhm.
of the emotional rut I was in. I knew that if this was going to work, that I had to make a commitment to myself
Mm.
to put in the effort that my husband and I deserved.
Yes.
And, my confidence in myself grew. And, being able to speak up for myself or stand up for myself,
Mm.
it really makes me feel very powerful
Yes.
and very, very happy to be me again.
Oh, I love that so much. Yes. Yeah, that is so amazing, right? It's like so many people go into this work because they want their marriages to be better, which is awesome and wonderful and amazing. But the unexpected sometimes thing that comes along is how much better they feel, just like you, about themselves, how much more powerful they feel, how much like how it feels good to be them in a whole new way.
Yes. I mean, I definitely feel like most of the work is internal. I mean,
Yeah.
you can't really you can't change anything external really. You can only
Yes,
work on yourself,
exactly.
and you can only control yourself.
Mhm.
You you can't really change anything externally. So in Treasured, you learn so much about yourself, um, and then the concepts and the tools and the methods you get learn help you learn how to deal with the issues, but you use them rather than to change others to suit your needs. You learn to approach issues with more, compassion and love to get the outcome that you want. You're not trying to change anyone else. You're changing the way you perceive things and the way you approach things.
Yes, you put that so beautifully, Gina. 100%. And like you said before, like you're shocked and surprised at like how your husband responds to that.
Yes, he from the very beginning responded very positively. Every time it happened, I was amazed until, now I feel very comfortable assuming that the response will be positive and supportive rather than,
Mm,
you know, negative the way it used to be.
mm. That's so beautiful. And again, like Gina, you're just such a beautiful testament to how you chose to do this work on you, just like you said, and on how you perceive and relate to your husband. And the overall effect of that is a total transformation of your marriage. So it's just so beautiful to hear. And I wonder if you have anything to share about, let me just say, like, how did you do this? Because I bet people are like, wow, that's so amazing. And how did you start to feel more safe with your feelings, right? Or like, how did you get brave and start, initiating connection?
First of all, like I said, I made the commitment because I really wanted this to work. I did not want to go through the rest of my life, feeling the way I had been feeling at the time. And
Yes.
so I made the commitment. I really wanted it to work.
Hmm.
And so I really paid attention to the coachings, and I read through all the material. And when I came across any of the material that I felt really hit home with me, I really focused on that and really tried to apply it in
Mm.
my in real life. And some of the specific skills, just a
Yeah.
few of them that really hit home were, like I said, the stress busting. Those
Mm.
are still, I mean, I still use those
Good.
when I get stressed out over something. Those are just amazing.
Yes.
The sensitive awareness work,
Yes.
um, the mastering emotional agency, which was really big for me,
Hmm.
um, and the loving on purpose.
Mm.
Learning to appreciate the good things in your partner and not to focus on the negative. That was really big for me as well, because I had been holding on to, all these negative things that had happened in the past. And I had been holding on to, a lot of resentment and anger. And,
Yes.
I had to learn how to let that go and appreciate my husband for, the person he had become, and not the person, and not resent him for the person that he had been in the past.
Mm. Yeah, I love that you're sharing that. You really did the work. I mean, it's as simple as that. You use the teachings and my coaching and you applied it. So that's really the ticket. I'm curious if there's any little tidbit you want to share, just specifically about the piece of, because I think at the heart of your work, again, was like you shared, like learning how to feel your feelings and specifically learning how to feel safe to feel those feelings, which is many people's work, honestly. Like even people might not realize it, but it is so often one of our main obstacles in our relationships is that we are very resistant to feeling hard feelings. And so, like you said, we kind of wall ourselves off or we shut down to emotion, which is weird when we think about it when we're highly sensitive people. You'd think we couldn't do that, but we do. We can do that, right? And so it's a numbing technique, it's a coping technique. And
Right.
so, what can you think of one thing specifically that helped you to sort of feel safe to feel those feelings more, that you did, that you played with, that you leaned into?
I would say learning that negative emotions are okay. You don't have to feel positive emotions all the time. You are not going to be in a good mood all the time.
Hmm.
Sometimes you're going to be in a good mood, sometimes you're not, and that is okay. And that when you're having the negative feelings, you can manage them
Hmm.
and you can, just sort of sit and let the emotions pass through you
Hmm.
and they will pass.
Hmm.
And it's not the end of the world.
Yes.
And that still helps me when something happens that upsets me. I can now very quickly, rather than have it ruin a whole day or even, more than a day,
Yeah.
I can sit and just say, okay, it's normal for me to feel this way. Just sit and, focus on the feelings in my body
Hmm.
and um, let it work its way through and let it pass and it works its way out.
Mm. Yes, it's so beautiful. And just hearing you talk about it like that, just like hearing you share that helps me. I was like listening to you, I felt really peaceful. So it's an interesting thing that as as we can learn that ultimately what you're just talking about is feeling more ease with the hard parts of our emotional experiences, right? As human beings. And when we can feel that more peace with that, we do feel safer. Like we feel safer having a full human experience, right? Instead of just like hiding away from it or trying to protect ourselves from it. And the ironic thing about that is it, just like you said, it passes away. It actually passes a lot quicker when we're not all upset that we're upset.
Yeah, when you're not
Right?
fighting it, yeah, when
Yeah.
you fight it, it just seems to drag on forever.
Yeah.
If you just accept it and let it work its way through and work its way out, it passes much quicker. And just to accept the fact that, that it's not wrong to have negative emotions. That's the way I felt for a long time, was that it was just wrong. And one of the things that I learned was that, it was okay to feel those and,
Mm.
how to deal with them. And that helped tremendously.
Mm. Yes. Thank you for sharing about that. So tell me what it was like for you to be part of a group of highly sensitive women working towards the same types of goals, right? Marriage, happiness. Yeah, how was that for you?
That that was really amazing. So we all are sort of sensitive to a lot of the same things. So our reactions to things are very similar.
Mhm.
Whereas sometimes, if you have a friend who isn't highly sensitive and you try to talk to that friend about something, they don't quite get how you're feeling because your reaction is so totally different. But being with a group of highly sensitives, everybody understood, your reaction to something. I know there were several times that I got really emotional and I felt embarrassed because I was so emotional, but I got really good feedback from everyone supporting me and, telling me how they would have been emotional in my place, or, it was perfectly natural. I got
Mhm.
support from them. Um,
Yes.
and knowing that we were all working towards, um, trying to have better relationships, more satisfying marriages, it made it much easier to open up and, to share our situations and share our experiences and share our struggles and also to share our wins. And as we became more and more comfortable with each other, we really became each other's cheerleaders and support systems. I will treasure my experiences with those ladies forever. I I consider them friends now.
Mm. Oh, yeah, there's so much heart. Yeah, and support in that group. I'm curious what you would say to a woman who was not so happy in her marriage, a sensitive woman, but hadn't quite, yeah, was kind of hesitating to do Treasured.
But first of all, I was hesitant too. I was scared. Um,
Hmm.
I because I had just been in my situation for so long, and I was just afraid, oh, this is just another one of those things and it's not going to work.
Yep. I
But
think
I
that's a
would
really
say,
common thing.
yeah, I would say Treasured is worth more than the investment, time, and effort that you put into it. You learn so much about yourself. You come away with so many tools, and you learn so much about how to approach situations, and how to handle your emotions, and how to handle your expectations. And it's not about changing the other person. It's about handling the situations, not the other person. And
Mhm.
it really does make a huge difference. It really builds your self-confidence, and teaches you how to take back your power, and stop handing your power over to someone else. It has made such a huge change in my relationship and my life that I would do it all over again in a heartbeat.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Do you have any final thoughts you want to share or anything that you want, any other thing you want other women to know or tips from your own experience that you want to share with listeners?
Another thing that I learned, that I think a lot of us HEPs, well, we can tend to get our feelings hurt very easily. At least I did.
Hmm.
Um,
Yes, that's so
and
common.
that was a big reason why I was afraid to speak up about anything. I was afraid to get my feelings hurt.
Yep.
But you learn ways to handle this. And the thing that hit home the most with me was realizing that most of the time his reaction is not about me. It's something to do with him.
Yes.
And so, it's probably, he's had a long, hard day at work, or he's worried about our kids for some reason, or, he's just tired. And once you realize that it's not about you, you can approach him with much more love and compassion. And that's what starts fostering the deeper connection.
Yes.
And it fosters that deeper connection rather than creating a resentment.
Yes. So beautifully put. 100%. So such beautiful wisdom, Gina. Oh my goodness.
I feel like Treasured it's the best thing I've ever done for my marriage, and for myself. I think my relationship with my husband is stronger now, even more than when we were first married, because our connection is deeper, and I feel like our foundation is just getting stronger. And the more time passes, the more confident I become, and the more I'm learning to love myself. And um it just reflects on all of my relationships, and just reflects on my perception of everything around me. So it doesn't just affect, your relationship with your husband. It affects, your whole outlook, and it's nothing but positive.
Well, thank you so much, Gina. And it just brings to mind how, I mean, you're just such a beautiful example of how, like, you dove into this work, you really took it on, and you saw change happening right away. And as you continued to use the tools and to kind of follow the work, and yeah, keep applying, in other words, all that you'd learned, like things just get better and better. And it's not like you came to me and things got better while we worked together and then they suddenly got bad, right? It's like they kept getting better because you are using the tools and the skills, and you're being uh, that more open, connected, or connecting version of yourself, and confident version of yourself, safe, secure version of yourself. And it just continues to ripple out and continues to give back to you. So I'm just so proud of you and so honored to have been able to help you get here, and so appreciative for you for sharing your story, because I know that that's a vulnerable thing to do. So thank you so, so much. I'm so grateful.
Well, thank you very much. I was honored to share my story and very honored to have taken your course and learned so much from it.
The feeling is mutual, that honored feeling. Thank you, Gina. And to all of you listening and inspired by Gina's story and are interested in learning more about how you too can make these kind of huge sweeping changes in your marriage that last, you've got to learn more about Treasured and join me. Enrollment for Treasured is now happening on an ongoing basis, so you can just start. You can join me now, because why would you want to wait 20 years like Gina did, or even just months if you're less than happy, to make these changes and feel so much better in your marriage? You can learn more at my website, www.lifeisworthloving.com/treasured, or find that link right in the show notes. I truly can't wait for you to be reporting these kinds of amazing changes in yourself and in your marriage. And I hope this story was helpful and inspiring to you. And be oh so well, my friend.